2 days' march of the 47,000 Confederates present for duty, whom he thus permitted to march away to their new strongholds without a gun fired or even a meditated attack. General McClellan had not only lost the chance of an easy and brilliant victory near Washington, but also the possibility of his favorite plan to move by water to Urbana on the lower Rappahannock, and from there by a land march via West Point toward Richmond. On that route, the enemy was now in his way. He therefore, on March 13, hastily called a council of his corps commanders, who decided that under the new conditions it would be best to proceed by water to Fortress Monroe, and from there move up the peninsula toward Richmond. To this new plan, adopted in the stress of excitement and haste, the President answered through the Secretary of War on the same day. First, leave such force at Manassas Junction as shall make it entirely certain that the enemy shall not repossess himself of that position and line of communication. Second, leave Washington entirely secure. Third, move the remainder of the force down the Potomac, choosing a new base at Fort Monroe or anywhere between here and there, or, at all events, move such remainder of the army at once in pursuit of the enemy by some route. 2 days before, the President had also announced a step which he had doubtless had in contemplation for many days, if not many weeks, namely that Major General McClellan, having personally taken the field at the head of the Army of the Potomac, until otherwise ordered, he is relieved from the command of the other military departments, he retaining command of the Department of the Potomac. This order of March 11 included also the already mentioned consolidation of the western departments under Halleck, and out of the region lying between Halleck's command and McClellan's command, it created the Mountain Department, the command of which he gave to General Fremont, whose reinstatement had been loudly clamored for by many prominent and enthusiastic followers. As the preparations for a movement by water had been in progress since February 27, there was little delay in starting the Army of the Potomac on its new campaign. The troops began their embarkation on March 17, and by April 5 over 100,000 men with all their material of war had been transported to Fortress Monroe, where General McClellan himself arrived on the 2nd of the month, and issued orders to begin his march on the 4th. Unfortunately, right at the outset of his new campaign, General McClellan's incapacity and want of candor once more became sharply evident. In the plan formulated by the 4 corps commanders and approved by himself as well as emphatically repeated by the President's instructions, was the essential requirement that Washington should be left entirely secure. Learning that the general had neglected this positive injunction, the President ordered McDowell's corps to remain for the protection of the capital, and when the general complained of this, Mr. Lincoln wrote him on April 9: "After you left, I ascertained that less than 20,000 unorganized men, without a single field battery, were all you designed to be left for the defense of Washington and Manassas Junction, and part of this even was to go to General Hooker's old position. General Banks's corps, once designed for Manassas Junction, was divided and tied up on the line of Winchester and Strasburg, and could not leave it without again exposing the upper Potomac and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. This presented, or would present when McDowell and Sumner should be gone, a great temptation to the enemy to turn back from the Rappahannock and sack Washington. My explicit order that Washington should, by the judgment of all the commanders of corps, be left entirely secure, had been neglected. It was precisely this that drove me to detain McDowell. I do not forget that I was satisfied with your arrangement to leave Banks at Manassas Junction. But when that arrangement was broken up and nothing was substituted for it, of course I was not satisfied. I was constrained to substitute something for it myself. And now allow me to ask, Do you really think I should permit the line from Richmond via Manassas Junction to this city to be entirely open, except what resistance could be presented by less than 20,000 unorganized troops? This is a question which the country will not allow me to evade. By delay, the enemy will relatively gain upon you. That is, he will gain faster by fortifications and reinforcements than you can by reinforcements alone. And once more let me tell you it is indispensable to you that you strike a blow. I am powerless to help this. You will do me the justice to remember I always insisted that going down the bay in search of a field, instead of fighting at or near Manassas, was only shifting and not surmounting a difficulty. That we would find the same enemy and the same or equal entrenchments at either place. The country will not fail to note, is noting now, that the present hesitation to move upon an entrenched enemy is but the story of Manassas repeated. General McClellan's expectations in coming to the peninsula, first, that he would find few or no rebel entrenchments, and second, that he would be able to make rapid movements, at once signally failed. On the afternoon of the second day's march, he came to the first line of the enemy's defenses, heavy fortifications at Yorktown on the York River, and a strong line of entrenchments and dams flooding the Warwick River, extending to an impassable inlet from James River. But the situation was not yet desperate. Magruder, the Confederate commander, had only 11,000 men to defend Yorktown and the 13-mile line of the Warwick. McClellan, on the contrary, had 50,000 at hand, and as many more within call, with which to break the Confederate line and continue his proposed rapid movements. But now, without any adequate reconnaissance or other vigorous effort, he at once gave up his thoughts of rapid movement, one of the main advantages he had always claimed for the water route, and adopted the slow expedient of a siege of Yorktown. Not only was his original plan of campaign demonstrated to be faulty, but by this change in the method of its execution, it became fatal. It would be weary and exasperating to recount in detail the remaining principal episodes of McClellan's operations to gain possession of the Confederate capital. The whole campaign is a record of hesitation, delay, and mistakes in the chief command, brilliantly relieved by the heroic fighting and endurance of the troops and subordinate officers, gathering honor out of defeat, and shedding the luster of renown over a result of barren failure. McClellan wasted a month raising siege works to bombard Yorktown, when he might have turned the place by 2 or 3 days' operations with his superior numbers of 4 to 1. By his failure to give instructions after Yorktown was evacuated, he allowed a single division of his advance guard to be beaten back at Williamsburg, when 30,000 of their comrades were within reach, but without orders. He wrote to the President that he would have to fight double numbers entrenched when his own army was actually twice as strong as that of his antagonist. Placing his army astride the Chickahominy, he afforded that antagonist, General Johnston, the opportunity, at a sudden rise of the river, to fall on one portion of his divided forces at Fair Oaks with overwhelming numbers. Finally, when he was within 4 miles of Richmond and was attacked by General Lee, he began a retreat to the James River, and after his corps commanders held the attacking enemy at bay by a successful battle on each of 6 successive days, he, day after day, gave up each field won or held by the valor and blood of his heroic soldiers. On July 1, the collected Union army had made a stand at the Battle of Malvern Hill, inflicting a defeat on the enemy which practically shattered the Confederate army, and in the course of a week caused it to retire within the fortifications of Richmond. During all this magnificent fighting, however, McClellan was oppressed by the apprehension of impending defeat, and even after the brilliant victory of Malvern Hill, continued his retreat to Harrison's Landing, where the Union gunboats on the James River assured him of safety and supplies. It must be borne in mind that this Peninsula campaign, from the landing at Fortress Monroe to the battle at Malvern Hill, occupied 3 full months, and that during the first half of that period the government,